Asia? You? Southeast Asia. I broke it up. Yeah. Europe. So your primary target market, I mean, so for a lot of you that are just holding your hand up the whole time, does that mean you don't care where in the world people are coming from, that you just want students from anywhere? Is that kind of the general feeling? You don't have like one or two markets that your institution has said, this is where we want our students from? No? Am I too loud or too quiet? I feel like I'm super loud. Sorry, okay. All right. Is your institution currently who currently works as part of a consortium with their institution? Couple? No, you don't. I'm assuming that's the rest of you, right? You don't currently work as part of a consortium. Okay, great. Is your institution starting to work with one or thinking about it or starting to set one up? Yes? No. Or you're somewhere in between. Okay. And then I think our last question is next. What do you hope to learn from this session? How to set up a consortium? No? You don't want to learn that? The benefits of joining a consortium. Yeah, a majority of you. The challenges of working with it. Oh, a lot of people want to know about challenges. Okay, great. And no preference. I'm just here because it's the morning and I got some coffee. Yeah, okay, great. So this slide here was going to be Roxana's, our colleague who could not join us today. She was going to talk about the evolution in the beginning, the starting point of higher education consortia. And she had the 60s, 70s, and 90s here. I don't know what happened to the 80s. Maybe nothing was going on in the 80s. I'm not sure. And she was going to talk about these things. Ivar and I have decided we don't really know anything about that, what she was going to say. So we're just unfortunately going to have to skip through those slides.
We were just going to say that, essentially, it's not one size fits all. There are no defined parameters. So really, you can make a consortium whatever you want. So we thought there actually wasn't that much value in terms of what happened in the past.
Yeah. And then types of consortia. So the title of our presentation today is Complementary Collaboration, Working Together to Recruit as a Consortium, right? So the focus of our talk today is international student recruitment. However, as Ivar just said, consortium can be all different kinds of things. There are academic consortia, technology planning consortia, local business and industry link consortia, research and development consortia. So Roxana, again, was going to talk about these different types. But as you can see, there are all different things that you could focus your consortium around, or the mission and the purpose of your consortium could be all different kinds of things, and academic consortia abound, of course, at the moment globally, but we today are going to focus on the pitfalls, the challenges, and the benefits of working and recruiting as a consortium. And this is me. I'm just going to grab my notes. So I work for the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I am also, or my institution is also part of something called Study Texas. In the United States, there are about 38 of the 50 states that have study state consortia. So Study Texas is the Texas Consortium. There's Study California, and Roxana, who is going to present with us today, comes from Study California. There's Study New York, Study Florida, Study North Carolina, lots of different states, but not all have a consortium. And generally what that is colleges and universities within that particular state working together to recruit. So Study Texas, our mission or objective, as it were, is to promote Texas as the premier study destination, thank you very much, premier study destination for international students and scholars. And within Study Texas, we only allow higher education institutions to be members. So that is colleges, community colleges, liberal arts colleges, and four-year colleges, as well as universities. So that would be master's and doctoral granting degree institutions. We allow public and private institutions. And within Study Texas, we have, it's a paid membership. There are annual dues. So each institution has to pay $400 a month to be a part of a month, oh my gosh, no, a year, $400 a year to be part of Study Texas. So those are our annual dues, and with that, your institution has access to the activities and events that we as Study Texas put on. We try and hold webinars a couple times a year. We have recruitment events. We have a presence at NAFSA, which is the big international education conference in the United States, which is obviously it's a global conference, and people attend from all over the world. So there are a few things that it's as a benefit of joining Study Texas. Now I know Study Florida, as an example, they allow high schools to be a part of their consortium. So not only are they colleges and universities, they also allow, and I think Study New York as well, and some of the other study state consortia allow high schools to be part of it. So for example, if there's a private and independent boarding school that recruits a lot of international students, they can be part of that study state consortium. Texas, at the moment, we don't have high schools, but it's something that we're thinking about changing, and we would rewrite or amend the bylaws of our Study Texas organization in order to include high schools if we decided to do that. And I mentioned that Study Texas, it's $400 a year to be a Study Texas member for your institution. Study Florida charge $1,000 a year. So as you can see, just as an example, in the United States, each study state consortia makes up its own rules, its own bylaws, can charge or not charge to be a member, charge as much as they want to, and can decide who is going to be a member. And that's how it operates in the United States. Of course, I'm speaking solely from a U.S. perspective because that's where I'm from, and afterwards Ivar will speak about the consortia that he works within and how it's maybe a little bit different. So our first slide that we have here, recruitment-focused consortia, I'm going to speak about the challenges first, and coming solely from a Study Texas point of view, and I'm going to use Study Texas examples, but I think Study Texas is a good sort of example to use because we're sort of your average, everyday study state consortia, nothing too unique about us. And so we're a good consortia to use as a case study, because if you are in the midst of thinking about joining or in the midst of setting up or wanting to set up your own, our challenges and pitfalls will probably be ones that you might also face as you're working through that within your own geographical region or wherever it is that you are. So the number one challenge, first thing that we have, need to try and reach a consensus or a unified voice or message. So within Study Texas, there are 38 institutions, colleges and universities. The state of Texas has about 200 colleges and universities altogether. So they're not all colleges and universities are part of Study Texas. So they're, I don't know, how much is that, a quarter-ish. We need to try and reach a consensus or a unified voice or message. One of the things that we've recently encountered, and that's difficult when you're working with 38 different institutions, one of the things we encountered recently was an organization in China approached Study Texas and wanted to have us sign an MOU with them to essentially have our institutions, our Texas institutions, each institution sign 3+1 progression agreements. And they were very interested in this happening. And so the president, or the chair of Study Texas, she's not here today, she's the chair for this year, she thought this was a fantastic idea. She flew out to China and she signed this MOU on behalf, and we knew she was doing this, she didn't kind of go rogue on us, but signed this agreement on behalf of, or the MOU on behalf of Study Texas. She came back, and as we got to learn a little bit more about this MOU and we discussed it amongst the institutions, we realized that actually no Texas institution is going to sign a 3+1 MOU agreement with an institution. It's just not going to happen. We might do 2+2s, but 3+1s are not going to happen. So it was one of these things where one or some of the members thought that it was a good idea and the others did not. And it's difficult to reach sometimes a unified consensus, and sometimes something might happen, an MOU gets signed that you don't all agree on, and then how do you work through that, and how do you kind of fix it, I guess, or handle it once it's happened and you need to amend it or go back and change things. And so that's something to think about as you're working through, that not all 38 or 40 members of your consortium are going to agree all of the time. In fact, rarely ever. Another challenge is low engagement from some members. Some members are doing all the work. So I'm on the board of Study Texas. I am the chair-elect. So next year I'll be the chair of Study Texas. And there are 10 of us on the board. I and maybe 3 or 4 other people pretty much carry the whole organization. So writing the newsletters, organizing the recruitment trip to Mexico, sending out invoices for people to pay their annual dues. There are about 3 or 4 of us that do all of that work, even though there are 10 board members and 38 members of Study Texas altogether. There's very little engagement from a lot of people. And that's something that's going to be a challenge as you're working through this and setting up a consortium for yourself. Trying to get everybody on board and everybody to put in their 10-15% to get all of the work done so that it equals 100% of the work getting done. That's hard. It's hard because some people are going to be engaged and some people are not going to be engaged. And it would be very easy for me to start feeling really resentful that I am doing all of this and that some people are not doing anything. And that's a challenge you kind of have to work through and come to accept as you're going through the process of setting up a consortium. Differing priorities, differing markets for each institution. What's the best use of our time and resources? So again, some institutions want to focus our time and resources on, in the case of Study Texas, on Vietnam, as an example. Others of us, India, as an example. Others of us think maybe we should be doing more digital or online promotion. And it's again deciding, okay, well, how are we going to, we're 38 institutions, we all have competing priorities. How are we going to decide what's the best use of our time? Should we do a little bit this year in one area and a little bit next year in another area? Does that make sense? There's a lot of discussions that need to be had and are had about all of these different competing priorities. And again, if you're going through and working through this, this is going to be something that you need to think about. The Study Texas board, we have monthly phone calls. We use Zoom, which is an online conference call platform, and every month, because Texas is a huge state, and some of you might be geographically closer, but for Texas it would be physically impossible for all of us to get together once a month. So once a month we have a Zoom conference call, everybody all together, and that way we can see each other's faces and have a good chat and work through all of these different competing priorities and what we're going to do next with our activities. Funding and staffing, again, is going to be a big challenge because we charge dues, that $400. Study Florida charges $1,000. Some study state consortia in the United States don't charge anything, or I think $50 a year. That's not very much money when you put it all together. So there's very little funding in many cases to get a lot done, and certainly not enough funding to hire somebody, to be an admin, to run the website and keep it updated, to make sure the emails to the General Study Texas email inbox are getting responded to organize flights and things for an in-person meeting. All of these things need to be done, and we're all volunteers. And so again, that goes back to who's doing all of the work, and because there's not enough funding to hire somebody to do that, you know, who's gonna raise their hand and say, okay, I'll answer the emails every month, or, you know, whatever. And so working through all of that is another problem. I know that the state of Colorado, Study Colorado, they actually have a lot of engagement from the state government. So the state of Colorado has actually funded for somebody, they pay the salary for somebody to be an admin for Study Colorado. And so that's something that you could consider, getting your local government involved, either if you're in the United States, your state or city government or a regional government, say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're promoting our geographical area as the premier study destination for international students. Would you be interested in helping fund us or support us? So you could maybe lobby your local government to get some help, or your state government to get some help in that respect, the way that Colorado has done. In Texas, we've been unsuccessful at doing that, so at the moment we don't have that support, and you might come across that as well as being a challenge. Board members change from year to year. We have board elections every year. You can only, at Study Texas, stay for five years as a board member, and so we have noticed actually in the years that I have been joining Study Texas, there have been 4 or 5 board members who have dropped out, and so we have to get a new one come in, and then you lose some of that continuity. It's getting that board member up to speed, and so from year to year, you might find that you're going great guns, you know, you've got some really good stuff going, and then the next year that person drops out, or 5 people drop out, and you kind of have to start all over again. And so maybe as you're setting up a consortium, how are you going to write it into the bylaws that it's a certain period of time, maybe a minimum of 3 years, that somebody has to participate in the board in order to keep that continuity going? So that's something to think about, because you don't want to have really good, you're moving forward, you're getting a lot done, and then it all kind of dies a death for a little bit because there's new people on board. So it is a challenge to keep that going. And then lastly, measuring ROI, return on investment. If you do an activity, if you do something with that money that Study Texas, as an example, has in its, so we have money from our dues, how do you measure your return on investment? Was it actually worthwhile? And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Study Texas used some funds to pay for a member, somebody from an institution, a member, to go to a recruitment fair in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure why we picked Saudi, but we did, and we sent somebody there. They attended a fair. They came back with, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of prospective student names. All in all, it cost about $6,000 or $7,000 for Study Texas paid for the flight, the hotel, the fare, everything. This person came back, shared all these names with us, Study Texas members, but for UTSA, nothing ever came of it. I never had any interest from any of those students. I talked to some of the other Study Texas members. Nobody said that they really got anything from it. So then you have to think, okay, what was the return? We spent about $7,000 and really have nothing to show for it. So was that the best use of our time, resources? How are we going to measure this ROI? Was it purely like, okay, we're getting out there, we're getting the Study Texas name out there, we're raising our profile? How do you measure that return on investment? Or are you purely going to measure it on the number of students who enroll in your institution from a certain activity? All of these different questions need to be answered, and as you're working through it, to think about, you know, is it worth my time? Was it worthwhile doing this? Okay, so that's me. We're going to stop here, and we're going to have an interactive activity. I'm going to make you get into groups, please. Maybe groups of 3 or 4. Kind of group yourselves together. We're going to have some discussion, because otherwise it can be really boring just listening to us. And we want to get the brain cells working this morning. We've all had coffee or tea, hopefully.
Feel free to move the seats around if it's easier.
Yeah. So as you're getting yourselves into groups, we have some questions on the board up here. Think about these different things and discuss them amongst yourselves. If you were to set up a consortium, what would the geographic boundaries be? Would it be a city or a state or a country? If you're from a smaller country, what would you use as the grouping for a consortium to make up a particular consortium? Maybe you're all arts universities, as an example. Could that be your consortium within an area? What types of institutions? Would you include everyone? High schools, boarding schools, or just HE? What would be your mission or your main objective? Study Texas is to promote Texas as the premier destination for international students and scholars. Would that be your mission, or would you include something else or change the wording slightly? What USPs do you think you would have within your own particular area? And how would you handle competing priorities? If you came across a situation where a member decided to go and study, go to China and sign an MOU on behalf of Study Texas, but it wasn't actually something that we all wanted, how would you handle that? What would you do? So if you could just think about that, chat amongst yourselves. We will have you feedback to the larger group later, so please don't use this time to gossip.
Do you all know what USP is? You all know the acronym USP, yeah? Unique selling point, yeah. World of acronyms.
We'll give you about 10 minutes.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, 10 minutes and then maybe 10 minutes.
Okay, everybody, we're going to, in the interest of time, wrap it up. Could someone just give me an example for the first point, geographic region? Who would like to just share where they would like to set up a consortium, geographic or subject-wise? What did you discuss? Anybody?
I think one thing that our group realized after discussing this is that it varies pretty widely based on, like, from the U.S. It really almost only makes sense to split it into states.
Sure, yeah.
Because there's so many institutions and it's such a big region. But, for example, for Ireland, they only have 33 institutions.
Yeah.
And we've done full country at UVM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. And types of institutions, anybody thought only HE or maybe only boarding schools? That could be a consortium in itself, right? Anybody have any thoughts on that or different idea? Yes?
It's not something we discussed. So is that okay? This is what I've been with St. Andrews for the last 16 years and traveled around the country. Now, it's very easy in our case. We go to the village school
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
because and with high academics.
Yep.
Because English schools in general, don't like to study abroad and like to study in the UK, but they can't afford to.
Mm-hmm.
And so the UK, by and large, doesn't offer scholarships or postgraduate.
Sure.
And people at the undergraduate level, parents would like to send their children closer to the UK rather than to the US.
Mm-hmm.
That means we need schools with excellent academics and deep pockets.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we choose those schools. So in that case, it's very easy to decide which place we want to go.
Sure, and that's absolutely true. I think for a lot of us, yeah, no matter where you're from, even in the U.S., Texas is the same. Good. Anybody have any USPs that you'd want to focus on for your consortium, or any thoughts about that? Did you discuss? Like for Study Texas, as an example, we go in with the cowboy theme. Because that's what we are. So, we use that to our advantage, the Wild West, but Texas is a place where, there's a lot of opportunity, the land of opportunity. So that could be our Texas, it's a large state, but our unique selling point. Any other ideas on that you discussed? No? Yeah.
We did discuss it, but I'm part of quite a sophisticated, I come from the similar Texas model.
Yeah.
Quite a sophisticated study cluster model for the city I live in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Very well supported by the council, so that helps. There's a lot of funds available. But we have the challenge of being a tourist destination and not wanting to present as just a tourist destination, because that's what we know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, together the city and the members, which come from high schools, universities, private providers,
Mm-hmm.
we really focus on affordability. And
Uh-huh. Oh, great.
we go in.
Yep.
So it's one of our points of difference.
Yep.
Employers in the city are very much on board. Many students want to stay on
Yeah.
after graduation, so that really gives us that edge when we go into.
And that's a really good point, employability, right? Why are students going abroad to study? Because they hope that at the end of their degree, they have a better chance of getting a good job. And that's the bottom line for all of us, right? No matter where we're from.
Can I just ask, sorry, what city is that? Okay. No, it's really interesting because I'm just wondering, in terms of representing that as a study destination, have other cities tried to join your consortium? Because obviously there'll be a lot of similarity perhaps in some of the cities that obviously employability might be slightly different. But has anyone else tried to join your consortium from another city?
Not from outside the city,
Okay.
but there's many study clusters set up.
Elsewhere.
The state is every state, and that's one of our bigger challenges is when you come to a market like India. We've got so many study clusters at the state level, at the city level.
Really?
And we work quite, it can be quite independent. There could be more collaboration, whether that was under a consortium or just, I guess, utilizing the resources that each individual institution has in the market and going in more for Australia, because we know that we need to sell the destination before we start talking about our individual institutions.
And so within your consortium, do you have everything from applied research institutions through to vocational institutions and everything in between?
Everything,
Yeah.
English language colleges, everything.
And does everyone engaged? Is everyone involved, or does some? Okay, the usual.
We have a very active board, and I think most of the institutions, I guess, take the lead, the higher education providers take the lead, have more resources to support that. So, yeah, I think there's
And we were talking about that one of the biggest challenges, because so many people put their hand up saying they wanted to know what the challenge was, that some people do most of the work. Have you managed to overcome that within your consortium, or is it the case that just one or two people do most of the work on behalf of everyone?
I think they've got pretty broad coverage. We've got a very strong strategy that identifies priority markets. There are definitely ones that are important to some institutions and not to others, but there's enough involvement from members to make it successful. We may have somebody that takes more of a lead with Japan,
Right,
or
yeah.
a lead with Latin America.
Yeah.
There's pretty wide coverage. I guess the challenge is everybody wants their piece of that because they're paying membership fees.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're quite hefty membership fees as well.
Yeah.
So if they come back and there's nothing for the school sector, and it was really a focus on higher education, then it's how can we find the opportunities for schools so they want to be on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's not enough.
Yeah. So that's that. I mean, and that's the challenge, I think, for all of us. Okay, we're going to move along to benefits, and I'm actually going to run through this fairly quickly from the Study Texas side because Ivar is going to share a few things. Opportunities or benefits from working as a consortium. Well, stronger together, right? You share best practice, you share resources, you share ideas. We're stronger as a group than as an individual. And again, more impactful messaging. Study Texas, we come across as Texas. You know, people know Texas and the Cowboys and the Wild West, and that's much stronger than a TCU and a Baylor and an SMU as an individual institution if they were at an event or a fair. So your messaging comes across more strongly. Cost sharing, recruitment, marketing activities, well, we pool our money together and we have more money to be able to make a bigger impact. A support network within your geographical area. I know one of the main benefits for me from participating in Study Texas is that I have a community that I can rely on, a support network of people just like me who work at institutions across the state of Texas, and that if I'm struggling with something at work, I can pick up the phone or write an email, and I have a colleague who maybe is hundreds of miles away, but who I know will relate to what I'm going through and be able to share that and share their experience, and I can commiserate with somebody, and having that real community and that real support network for me has been absolutely invaluable. It might not necessarily benefit UTSA so much, but as an individual working in international student recruitment and admissions, I find that very, very important to have that network and that community. Other states, regions, countries are doing this. This has become the norm. So an opportunity or benefit of forming your own, wherever you are, consortium, is that you're finding Scotland, Texas, across the United States, Australia. It's happening everywhere. So if you aren't currently doing it in your region or in your area, you'll find that there's lots of really good examples of people who are doing it well, and you can learn from them and take advantage of that. And lastly, the collective power to lobby your local and national government and maybe affect policy changes. Again, this is something that a lot of consortia are doing. Study Texas, not so much, but in other states they are. And as a national power, I know the UK, they are able to lobby their government to promote international education on the national stage, to say to the UK government, international students bring X, Y, and Z benefits to the country. This is why we need to promote, international student. This is why we need to support and put money and resources into international education, because these are, this is what's happening, and this is what's benefiting all of us together, our country as a whole. So as a consortium, you have that stronger, more impactful voice than you would if you were just an individual institution. And with that, I'm going to, and we will leave questions. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Talking about the cost sharing of recruitment and marketing activities, how do you ensure that all partners of the consortia take an equal share in terms of doing a marketing campaign, global campaign?
Right, so we use that money from the dues. Yeah, so for example, Study Texas at the moment, $400 a year. We put it into a bank. We have a Study Texas bank account. At the moment, we have something like $33,000 in there. And if we want to do something advertising-wise, or attend a fair, or do our Study Texas breakfast at NAFSA every year, the money comes from that. And all institutions who are members are allowed to participate, bring their materials, join in on it.
Hi guys, so we are running out of time, so we've got about 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Scottish Consortium, and we've actually got quite a few colleagues in the room from various Scottish institutions who can, by all means, chip in if there's anything that I have inadvertently missed. So, just to go back to the start, why have we got a Scottish consortium? And I know some people in the room have actually visited Scotland, but quick test since it's early in the morning. Does anyone know how many countries make up the UK? No trick questions. 4, good. Can you name those countries? Good. Now this is very topical, obviously. We aren't going to talk about Brexit today, but so I'm sure it'll come up in conversation at some point. But, okay, a more tricky question. Does anyone know when the Acts of Union took place, when the parliaments of Scotland and England were unified? What year? Yes, okay, good. Bit early for a constitutional lesson, but 1707. So we've had a very strong relationship as a United Kingdom for many, many years. But obviously we've had a Scottish referendum on independence that's taken place recently. So there is a political angle to higher education in the UK. And we feel that it's important to have a Scottish representation so that we don't get lost in the UK brand. Very often when you see the UK represented, it's the London skyline, it's red telephone boxes, the Queen, the Union Jack, and the nuances of Scotland are very often missed. So it's very important that we bring what is special about Scottish education to the fore, and that people are able to make a decision on whether Scotland is the right place to study versus other options around the world, including England. So as part of the Scottish Constitution, we have devolved power from Westminster. Does anyone know what types of issues the Scottish Government has control over? So obviously Westminster in London is the centre of government, but Scotland actually has control over education, some tax laws, justice and so on. So as a result, as a consortium, we have an incentive to tap into some of the funding that's made available by the Scottish Government. They also have branding and marketing materials that are produced that are non-institutional specific that we can use to give traction to the activities that we're involved in. So straight off the bat, we have an incentive to be a Scottish institution as opposed to just being that broader UK brand. We also have a unique educational system in Scotland. It's not the same as England. Sometimes people think we're an expensive version of the English model. We aren't. Do you know how many years a standard undergraduate degree is in Scotland? 4, yes, absolutely, that's right. But many people don't know that, and when we speak to counsellors in India, they often tell us our students are thinking about the more narrow English model or the American liberal arts system, and the students are choosing between one or other, and aren't always aware that there is a Scottish hybrid version that exists. So as a result, no one is going to promote Scotland if we don't, so we feel it's very important to have that consortium going out and helping both counsellors and students understand what the benefit may be of a Scottish education. There are also cultural differences. I mean, the UK is a very small island, but there are cultural differences. We are cooler. I don't mean temperature, I just mean, no, I'm only joking. But, you know, that we are a Celtic country, and we have different food and different music, different sense of humour. We have a sense of humour. If there's any English colleagues in the room, I'm going to be getting into trouble. No, I'm only joking. But there are also a lot of stereotypes that prevail. You know, there's this idea that Scotland is way up north, that the Vikings are still marauding around the coastline, pillaging. 5G, forget 5G, we're still using carrier pigeons and so on. And, you know, you may laugh, but we had a send-off reception just a couple of days ago, and a parent and son came to me and said that they'd entered through the border in London, and the border guard, in his usual aggressive self, said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to study at the University of St Andrews." And he said, "What are you going to do that for? It's cold, it's freezing, and it's way up north." So genuinely, there is a lot of stereotypes that Scotland has to defend itself against. and promote the benefits as well as the challenges, because at the end of the day, it's not just all benefits, benefits, benefits. There are challenges as well. So the final thing outside of the UK and stereotypes and opportunities that may exist, we often find that many international schools, a lot of the counsellors come from a US background. And so a lot of the messaging cascading down to students is very North American, if not American-centric. So as a result, we feel it's important to help educate the counsellors as well as the students of what the benefits are. So going back to that point again. So then in terms of our structure, we talked a little bit about the different structures that exist for consortium. The Australian example is a very interesting one and maybe is more akin with what I'm going to describe in Scotland. So as I say, there are incentives in place, first of all, for Scotland to have a consortium. We are a small country within the UK equally, so there's only a handful of universities, so it's quite good for them to collectively come together and represent the sector as well. We have an overarching body called SUIG, the Scottish Universities International Group, and the most senior members of international offices, admissions offices would be represented there. But then we have smaller groups that lie under that main group that target certain parts of the world. So this is the death of a thousand acronyms, but we have SARG, the South Asia Recruitment Group, of which any activity in India would, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan and so on would be a part of. We have MERG, the Middle East Recruitment Group, and NARG, North American Recruitment Group, and so on and so forth. And this gives us real focus. It gives us the ability to put our time, resources, energy into a given part of the world. So it's a possible model that you might consider if you're setting up a consortium, that it's more broad than just here in India, but you can actually cover the whole globe by doing that. And then there's a flow of information back and forward to SUIG as appropriate. Each smaller group has its own constitution. It has a reporting structure with a chair, a vice chair, a treasurer, a secretary, and so on. And the various universities are able to then lend support to the group so that it's not just one person doing all the work. And that will rotate because the role will change every year or 2 years. So we feel this is a good model where it shares the responsibility. It allows there to be a very professional approach to minute taking, sharing of notes, and then a back and forth flow of information to the more senior group. These groups are also extremely important for lobbying government. In the UK, the post-study work visa was rescinded in 2012, and that had a massive impact on the Indian market. And it has come to the fore again. So these bodies, these consortium, have a lot more power and weight when lobbying government on these issues. So another good reason to have that. We then solidify these activities in this consortium by having an annual conference where we get together, we discuss the challenges, we look back of what the work we've done, where the success has been, and what the challenges are for the future. So it is a really tight and well-run consortium that has many layers to it. We're always evolving, we're always growing. We don't have an inbox that is managed where various volunteers will answer the emails within that, whether we should or we shouldn't. That's maybe one we can discuss. So there's little subtle differences from different consortia that we may look at. But currently we share minutes and information from our own inboxes and share that around the group. So the benefits of a consortium, and a lot of this will be more Indian tailored rather than necessarily global, so I won't go into the North American side of things in too much detail. But basically, we've got to be honest, with our consortia and the one in Australia, I know there's a colleague in the room that has a consortium that's more about the applied sciences and not necessarily covering every institution in that given country. With us, every institution takes part, and they all have different USPs, they all have different subjects on offer, different histories, and so on. So some institutions in our consortia will engage more than others, and rather than having a dues system being paid at the start of the year, we will have an activity like NAFSA, for example. The grand figure is given, and then everyone's asked who wants to participate, and based on the number of people that participate, that fee is then split between those that take part. And obviously the more that take part, the cheaper it becomes. So that's our kind of structure. Whether that's right, whether we want to move to a dues system, again, that's one that we can discuss and have a think about. But certainly these consortium give the potential for deeper penetration into a market. Councillors might be more willing to say yes to a consortium coming in to promote education in a given geographical area rather than one university that they may or may not have heard of. So it may give you more penetration into the market. It also helps counsellors manage their time easier. You know, some high schools are very, very popular, and so having one meeting for 10 universities rather than 10 individual meetings is very helpful to them. As I say, lobbying government, access to funds that may exist, all these things are a benefit of the consortium. And that collective brand in what is a very busy marketplace with New Zealand, the Netherlands, Ireland, Scotland, the UK, America, and everything in between, it's a very busy marketplace, very difficult for students to try and work out where should I go. So I think having a more of a collective brand is easier than 4,500 universities saying this is why you should come here. It helps them narrow down their choices a little bit as well. Challenges, just racing on to this, echoing a lot of what has been said. Sharing the workload is obviously a big one. At the end of the day, we have to be honest. In a consortium, we are competing with one another. You know, let's be honest. At the end of the day, this is not a charity. It is competition. It is a marketplace. Unfortunately, these terms do get applied to higher education these days. But it is also important for your brand and reputation to be seen with colleagues in the sector, to be contributing, to be hardworking, to be a good colleague as opposed to someone who's just out for their own benefit. So there is a lot of diplomacy needed at that level as well. And so if you have anyone involved in the consortium, it's very important that they are really putting in the effort that they would in their day-to-day job, because as soon as people start talking, saying you don't want to work with them or they represent that university, it has massive impacts on your recruitment process from a professional perspective, for example, and so on. Some of the other potential drawbacks you have to be aware of is if you're with a consortium, you may not have that one-to-one connection with the counsellors. It may be someone else doing that on your behalf, so you don't get the chance to build up that rapport and that relationship with the school that might be important for your future longevity. So that's one potential drawback. You may also find that because you're coming as a consortium, the school says, right, we're going to run a small fair. Here's your stall, stand there, the students will come round and speak to you. You then maybe have 1-2 minute conversation, elevator pitch type discussion, as opposed to a 40-minute in-depth overview of your institution. So that's another thing that might play out. What we found with schools in India is it really does vary how they set up that day. So it does depend a lot on the counsellors and how they want to put that together. That might be a good engagement point to actually give a few suggestions to the counsellor to say, look, you might want to run the day like this because we found this works really well. I'm sure they'd really appreciate that. So just moving on finally to give you a quick case study of the Scottish Consortium, what it does in India. And this is the schools tour that's actually running at the minute, and some colleagues are part of that at the moment. So I've spoken to a colleague who's been heavily involved in setting that up over the years. And she said that one of the challenges is arranging multiple visits over a wide geographical area, taking into account delayed flights, monsoon, colleagues that don't have visas and have got stuck in Istanbul, and various challenges that are unforeseen that can just throw everything up in the air and change everything. Local holidays, festivals, traffic, dialects, and so on and so forth. You then have the situation where in India, the culture of setting up a meeting is slightly different. I'm sure you found this, and things can change at the last minute, as I have found. Or even walk into a school, as I once did, and the principal said, quick anecdote, 'cause it's quite funny. The principal said, I can't believe you've come back after the way you carried on last time, and you promised this, and you didn't deliver that. And I'm sitting with my colleague, Kuri, and I'm going, what's happened? I've never been to the school before. And my colleague quietly sat and listened to the principal and gave him his due. And then he said, Principal, we've never been to your school before. It turned out it was another institution who I will not name. But these things do happen, and it can throw things up in the air. We also find that in the Scottish tour group, they don't have a set list of schools that they meet each year. So it's new schools, it's new relationships, and that can take a long time. Also, a lot of schools in India tend not to want to collaborate with other schools and allow one session with all the students coming along to meet the consortium. That happens a lot in other countries, so it doesn't yet happen in India. So it's again, what this is adding up to is a lot of time and a lot of effort. So if you are thinking about setting up a consortium in India, this is a massive challenge. So the way the Scottish Tours Group has got round this is actually employ a middle person for a fee, who is based in India, who will set up the school meetings based on minimum 2 school visits per day. They will arrange the transport to and from the school and actually accompany the group to the schools to manage any issues that might happen on the day. And the constituent universities of the consortium have said that this has been extremely helpful and a lot more beneficial experience overall. So I'm looking at my clock. I've gone over by 2 minutes, so I'm going to leave that there. But I think we'll just open up for a couple of questions just before we get chased out.
Put our contact details on the screen if you want to email us, and our business cards are here as well if you want to pick one up before you run out. I also brought Study Texas pins if anybody wants a Study Texas pin to stick on their things. But any questions?
Please.
Like a common app or a group app? Common app for the consortium? In Texas we have, it's called Apply Texas. But I don't think other states do. And Apply Texas is for all Texas institutions, it's not just one state. Anyway, please feel free to take a card or write down our details. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, thank you, thank you.